Bear's doing a proper swoop. My name is Britt Merrick, and I shape for Channel Islands Surfboards. My parents started Channel Islands in 1969. I was born in 1972, and I've been shaping since about 1990. Right now I'm riding our new model, the Happy. It's just a high-performance shortboard. Originally it was a HANDSHAPE for Dane, and then started working on it with Zeke and Lakey and Connor O'Leary and a few other people on the team, and it's going good. All the models that I design start as HANDSHAPEs. I don't do any designing on the computer or CAD programs. Nothing against it, it's just not my thing. It doesn't excite me. I like hand shaping, I like starting that way. So for example, this new model, the Happy, was a hand shape that I did for Dane and several iterations of it. So yeah, all the boards I do start as hand shapes. I think that's where the craftsmanship is. I think that's, for me, that's where the fun is. I don't have that much fun just sanding out lines, but I have a lot of fun with a planer and a saw and stuff like that. And then developing it to this level, you know, where you can cut a bunch and get them right is great, but yeah, it all starts as handshakes. I can't live without a square, a carpenter's square. Here's one right here. And for some reason, there's like none of them in Australia, and no other shapers have these things. So I have my buddy run to the hardware store and find one. So I actually can't live without a square. I don't know how people measure stuff without it. When I'm surfed out and starving, what do I eat? I pretty much just eat meat. I'm a hunter. I hunt a lot of elk and deer and wild pigs and stuff like that, and birds. So when I'm super surfed out and super hungry, just a chunk of meat on the barbie, mate. I don't want to answer that question. Surfers that are non-communicative, that's the hardest to deal with. Like, you make a batch of boards, and like, let me know how they go, how can we make them better? I thrive off feedback. If it's good feedback, great. If it's not, if it's like, hey, the board doesn't work, and so let's talk about why, that's even better. Some of the most help I've had in the last year was working with Lakey on boards that she didn't like. That's just super helpful for me. I learned a ton. Got the boards to work well for a lot of other people, but I'm still working on some stuff with her. But just non-communicative surfers, I think, are the hardest. Just tell me what you think about the boards. I don't care if it's good or bad or ugly, but then we can at least progress and progress together. Oh, Dane Reynolds for sure. Thing about EPS epoxy construction. It's got something to it that we all like, and then it's got a lot of things about it that we don't like. And so we're all kind of chasing, how do we get the EPS epoxy combination to feel right? That has to do with flex, that has to do with sort of the frequency of the flex, the characteristic of the flex, the rigidity of the blanks, and the different characteristics of epoxy as a resin, the way that that feels. So we're all trying to harness that, and it seems like with the spine tech, we're really getting there. I mean, I think Seabass said this year it's the best he's ever felt EPS and epoxy feel. So the spine is able to, you know, when you push on a board, you're flexing the board, and that flex becomes stored energy. And with the spine, it stores that kinetic energy, and when you unweight, it just voing, it just projects. It really like releases that kinetic energy in a really good way. So they've just been feeling unreal. You know, Mick chose it for the stab in the dark board, and that was great. I don't even think he liked epoxy and EPS prior to that. Well, when I was growing up, I used to spend hundreds of hours in my dad's shaping bay doorway, just watching. When I was a Grom, like, I grew up my parents were poor when I was growing up, and they put everything that they had into building Channel Islands. They borrowed $200, and they bought some resin and some cloth for that $200, and they started doing it. And my mom was working in the front of the building, my dad was in the back making the boards, and so there was no place for me to be but just there in the factory. And like I said, they were working every day, all day, and late into the night because we were pretty bored and they were trying to make it happen. So I would just spend hours in the doorway of my dad's shaping room watching him shape, soaking that in, experiencing that, and I was always captivated by it. I was always captivated by the way that he used his hands and his tools and the way that stuff came together. I got to see like really high highs in that experience. I got to see low lows. I remember my dad in the shaping room one time just like struggling with his board, just snapping it in half full on karate chop. And then, you know, got to watch him shape for some of the best surfers in the world. So he's definitely been the biggest influence, and I can't really get him out of my head. Like every time I'm shaping, I kind of feel him through me and through my hands and visualize his movements. And so he's been the biggest influence. Other than that, I really like Timmy Patterson's boards. Timmy Patterson is a super cool guy. He recently made me a board. I was amped on it. It worked great. I still ride it. I love it. Thank you, Timmy. I really like his boards. They always look good. They always look fast and clean. I think he's a great shaper and a cool guy. It was years ago. I went to Todos Santos with Dan Malloy. And you know the Malloys are like chargers, big wave surfers, and I'm just like kind of scared. I had shaped this 910 for big waves at the time. I was surfing a few big waves, and we went to Todos Santos, and it was pretty big, and Dan was sitting deeper than me, right, because he's more ballsy than I am, and the set comes, but it kind of comes out of the south, so it's coming toward where I am, but it's a cleanup set. It's like way outside. So we start stroking for the horizon, and because he was sitting like 30 yards deeper than me, he actually made it over the left shoulder of the thing, and I was right in the apex of the peak. And I can remember paddling up the face of this thing. I don't know, it was like huge, and I'm paddling up the face, and I did what you should never do when you're surfing waves like that. I tried to push through the top of it. I was honestly just too scared to bail my board. I'm like, I don't want to let go of something that floats. And so I tried to push through the top of the wave, and I popped just through the lip. And right then I saw Dan coming over the shoulder, and he looked back at me, and he yelled my name, and he reached for me, and as he reached for me, I just started going backwards over the falls, holding my 910, and we just collapsed together on the bottom, and I think I was down for like 6 or 7 minutes. It was gnarly. Worst wipeout of all time. Whose fault was it? It was my fault. It was a rookie move. You've got to hand shape. You have to hand shape in order to really understand surfboards and to understand hydrodynamics and foam and the way that it all comes together. You've got to hand shape. So spend as much time as you can hand shaping. Obviously, you're probably going to do machine blanks depending on what you're doing, but there's a whole like layer of experience and knowledge and understanding of foam and putting all the rocker and contours and the rails and the foil together that you won't get unless you go at it with a planer. So anybody that's getting started in shaping, start hand shaping. If you just start sanding lines, that's not really shaping. You got to start hand shaping. Gosh, I just love it. Shaping never gets stale for me. I love the creative process. I love the relational aspect of it, like being with Reef here today, working on boards, getting to know each other, and just chatting and sharing this experience together. Shaping's kind of meditative for me. I get in there, I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm not thinking about all the stuff, all the drama. You know, I'm just like doing it, and I love the way that foam feels in my hands and on my body. And I love the way that foam responds. Like, I can take my tools and make the foam do what I want it to do. And then when that goes out and it does what the surfer wants it to do, like that's a super satisfying feeling. My dad always taught me that the job of the shaper is to serve the surfer. Like, what does the surfer want to do? What do they want to experience? It's our job to help them do that and experience that. And I love that process. So when I make a board for someone and they're amped, I get super amped. That keeps me in the bay, but also just the whole sort of meditative process of making a board. It helps me feel a little more centered and balanced and stoked when I do it.